Joined by Christopher Whitt. He's a professor at Augustana College in the United States. Thank you for being with us tonight on France 24. Now, during that speech last night, right off the bat, Donald Trump condemned racism, anti-Semitism, hatred. He's come a long way, hasn't he, from some of the very inflammatory language he used on the campaign trail. Do you think President Trump is maturing and realizing the effect that his language has had on others?
I mean, it's a big, I guess, a big reward to him to say that one night of him not saying things that would be very divisive, or one night of him mentioning the problems that are associated with anti-Semitism or racism, that all of a sudden that erases so much that he's done before. Last night was a lot about presentation. It wasn't as much about substance being too different than what we've seen both from the campaign trail as well as the early month and a half of his presidency. So I couldn't go as far as to say that he's made some big growth or big change. He certainly followed a script a little bit more and changed his presentation style.
It was interesting to hear him say that the time for trivial fights is over, because when you look back at the last few weeks, I mean, this is a president who's been in spats with everyone, from the actress Meryl Streep to the news network CNN to Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, all of this since he took office. People have been waiting, though, for him to be a bit more presidential. Do you think he's at least making the effort now?
I think that he definitely used this stage to open the door for him to maybe make such an effort. But a lot of times we end up focusing so much on the various spats that he may get into via Twitter that we miss some of the infighting that goes on among Republicans and then the Trump administration, or even some of the things that go on in terms of him having some issues with some of his appointees and not really allowing them to make decisions as to staffing. So there are lots of different things that I guess, depending on the audience, could be considered as trivial fights. Now, when it comes to the things that you mentioned with Twitter, when he's talking about those celebrities, if in the next few days and few weeks and few months we see him pull back from that and he focuses more on the job of the president and the institution of the presidency, maybe we'll look back at this as a turning point. But I really think to make a clear evaluation of that, we need to take a little time to see if he decides to change his approach after giving the speech, or was it solely something focused on the speech?
And what about policy then? Because he talked about immigration, which is obviously one of his key themes, something that he's talked a lot about, how he wants to crack down on illegal immigration. But the speech was criticised for really being low on detail, for example, about healthcare, about repealing Obamacare, about tax reform, about those kind of issues. Were you hoping to hear a bit more detail on some of those issues?
Certainly. When talking about healthcare reform, he talked about a lot of the things that really might appeal to many Americans, but he didn't end up opening the door for how might some of these things be paid for. He didn't really talk a lot about what might be done to replace the individual mandate. And I think as you go down the line on things dealing with the environment, things dealing with race and policing and all types of different issues, he did have a lot of lofty language. And a lot of times that's to be expected in a presidential address to the joint session of Congress. But he certainly didn't put any meat on the bones for some of these things, particularly in a time where in these first weeks of his presidency, we haven't heard a lot of detail, and there hasn't been a lot of work done on the detail side by Republicans in Congress or with him. So this was an opportunity maybe missed by him.
Professor Whitt at Augustana College, thank you very much indeed.